This is a demonstration for the Northern Home wall section as it was performed previously in some of the previous classes. I'm going to show you how to start from scratch on that. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I am going to go up to, this is Sarah's wall section right in here. And if you notice in the wall section, what she has located here is she's already got her break lines in here. Now what I'm going to ask you to do is to draw it without the break lines. So it basically would be drawn like this, which means that you would have the full heights, floor to floor, indicated. Let me go ahead and let's go to the other sheet. All right, so here's an example of a full section drawn with the actual levels in there. So this is our main level right in here. That would be equated to 0, 0. You can see here that it's denoted as top of subfloor main, elevation 0, 0. The level down here at the bottom is going to be the lower. There's the upper level, and there's some in-betweens levels that I will go show you how to do it. So in this section, what we're going to do is we're going to identify every type of line, hatch, detail item or detail component that may be indicated in here that's going to help you draw the drawing. First thing that you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and start by drawing lines horizontally that are going to represent your levels. This one is actually not a level, but this is the top of plate up in here, which is the height of the wall, which is at 8'2". Your floor levels between the basement, the main, and the upper are 9 foot each. So if we're actually to take a dimension at this point, you can see that we have a dimension there of 9 feet. Also important for any annotations that you're going to do is that you are set to 3/4 inches equal to a foot. That's the same scale as you were showing the stair section previously. So let's begin by identifying how we can use the detail components, which is under the Home tab right at the end right here in most computers. Some may be a little bit different. So what we're going to do is we're going to hover our cursor and we're going to go over different parts of the drawing. So as an example, if we hover over this, it's going to indicate, if you hold it right there, it's going to indicate that it's a hatch. It tells you what the color is, whether it's an override or not, and it tells you the layer that it's on. Same thing, for example, applies with these hatches right here. Gives you the layer that they are on also. One last one is here. So this is one of the type of elements that we have in this drawing. It's going to be hatching. The other one is going to be line work. As an example, if we hover over this right in here, tells you that it's simply a line at this point. Same thing with some of the reinforcing in here. Just line work. Basically, that's what it is. In some cases, you may end up with polylines. I think I cleaned that up and did not draw any polylines in this, even though there is some corrections that need to be made here. All right. The thing that's going to be used the most in this drawing, besides the line work, is going to, and the hatching, is going to be what we call detail items. Detail components have to do with different parts of the construction method that you're going to be doing. So you have to make sure that when you click on the detail components right in here that you are using the U.S. materials library or the library for the components right in here. Be careful because there are 3 different ones. Actually, this one has more than 3. It has, I guess in 2022, they updated it to include some additional ones. The one you need is the US MDB. And the reason for that is if you were to click on any of the other ones, the divisions would be set up differently. In this case, the divisions are set up based on what we call the Construction Specifications Institute. Divisions 3, for example, has to do with materials that are concrete. Division 4, masonry. Division 5, metals, and so on. So review these before you start drawing so you get a little bit familiar with what you're going to be doing. We're not going to be using all of them, but we will be using some of those. So as an example, if we go to masonry, we kick the plus right in here. You're going to see that there are subdivisions underneath that. Common work for masonry, clay unit masonry, concrete unit masonry, glass unit masonry. Let's use division 042200, which is concrete unit masonry. Let's hit a plus on that. And then you can see these basically have to do with the masonry blocks, the CMUs that you're going to be using. Here's an example, a 2-core, 3-core, etc. As you go in, there's bond beams, which are a different material, fluted. All of these are different types of concrete masonry units that are used. We're going to be using the 2-core. When you highlight that, 42200 2-core, you're going to see that you have all the different sizes in here. The two that we are going to be using are going to be the 8 by 8 by 16, and we're also going to be using the 12 by 8 by 16. So let's close that out. And one thing that's going to be helping you is if you bring in Sarah's drawing, so feel free to bring in Sarah's drawing into yours, but not to copy what you're doing. This is mainly as a reference only. So what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to hover over her, hatching, etc., just like I did on the drawing that I had done. And you're going to see there you have the color, layer, and line type that's indicated in here. So use hers as a guideline for it, which is going to be very similar to the one that I had here. Again, to repeat, do not draw it like this with the break lines. I want full height, floor to floor as it's supposed to be, including your distances, horizontal and vertical. So here's where we go. So let's go ahead and let's hover over, let's say this right in here. This is a detail component. If you hover over it, it tells you what it is. It's a 2-core CMU under component information. Units are in inches. And the keynote is the division that you'd be finding it in the detail components. 0422. And there it is. 2-core. Hover over a little bit longer. Description is a 12 by 8 by 16. Then it has some information on the actual sizes of it that it's going to be coming in, etc. So how do we insert that in our drawing? The first thing, what you're doing when you cut a wall section, it's like taking a knife through the house vertically and going all the way from the roof all the way through the basement and foundation and to the earth down below. What you need to know is where that cut is. So if we were to go to any one of these constructs over in here, let's go ahead and let's go to the main construct. Open that up. This section that we're taking is going to be taken right through here. It's going to be taken through the porch, through the beam holding up the rafters, and through the wall in front here, through a window. We're not going to be showing the cabinetry, but it repeats itself. It usually will end somewhere in here, and it repeats itself all the way through the basement, through this level, which is the main level, and through the upper level also. So with that in mind, let's head back to the wall section, the one that I had. And let's see if we can start drawing here. Now, if you've already drawn your stair section, you could already have laid out your main level and your upper level here and your basement level. So if you could project from the top of the subfloor, remember this last element right in here is your finished floor. We want a subfloor. So that line is going to be taking off from that level. Same thing applies on the main level, the top of the subfloor, which is this plywood element that we're showing right in here. And then in the basement, it's the top of slab. This dashed line represents the finished floor. There's the finished floor elements and the finished floor elements there. All right, so with that in mind, I recommend starting at the main level and starting with what we would call the subfloor. So let's find out what's the easiest way to find out what that is. If you hover over it, it tells you it's plywood. With a little bit more detail, it's probably what we call tongue and groove plywood. The units are in inches, and the keynote is 061600. Let's hold it on there again. And the description is it's calling for a 3/4 inch plywood. It has a more descriptive keynote located right in there, and it gives you the actual thickness, which is 0.75. So let's head over to the detail components. Click on that tab. Make sure again that you are in US, and this time we're going to go to Division 6. Going to open that up, and we're going to go to sheathing, 616, and there you're going to find plywood right in there, and we're going to go down to 3/4 inch. We're going to insert the component. When we insert component, you will notice that you get a little item next to your cursor crosshairs. Also here under properties, you're going to see that it says description, 3/4 inch plywood. There's the sheathing, and it also tells you that the view that we are installing is a section. So we're going to go ahead, and if you notice, the plywood is going to occur above the line. We want it to occur below the line. So we're going to do a Y flip. Let me see if that works. Actually, I think it would be an X flip. That brings it down below. We're going to left click, and we're going to drag to the right. What that does, it extends it out. You don't have to go too far, maybe about that far right there. You notice it placed the element right there. Again, if you hover over it, it's going to give you all the information on that. This is the surface on the main level that is very common in what we call platform framing, to where they create a platform so they can build the next level above it. All right, so the next item that we have here, directly below that, is going to be the floor joists that we have in the main level. So if you hover over this element right here, this is called a ribbon joist. It goes around the perimeter of the building. If you notice, again, it's still under keynote 06. So that's going to be wood. And it tells you what it is. It's basically a 2x10. Gives you the actual dimension, 9.25, etc. So let's go ahead and go to the detail component. 6 is still open. Let's close sheathing. This is going to be found under wood framing. And it's what we call nominal cut lumber. And we're going to look for the 2x10 right in here. And we're going to insert the component. And again, if you wanted to, we could rotate whatever direction we want, so it makes it easier to place. I'm going to place it right here, and I'm just going to move it into place. Again, looking at the section, we notice that the outside face is flush with the edge of the plywood that we inserted previously. I'm going to go ahead and, using the move command, I'm going to go ahead and move it over. Now, once again, I inserted that as a section. That's why it's got the X through it. That means it's coming at you, and it's being cut by that section cut. But what also happens is we have a number of floor joists which are going left to right, which are parallel, or which are actually perpendicular to our view. So we're not cutting through it. We're sort of seeing it as an elevation. So what we can do is, once again, go to the detail components. Repeat the 2x10 insert component at this point. But instead of section here, let's go ahead and left click on that little arrow right there. Let's go to elevation. And we can draw that right there and drag it over to the right. So now we have the ribbon joist, which is 2x10. we have our floor joists. Now, this will add a note to it so it clarifies it, which will let them know that it is at certain number of inches on center as required by the structural framing for the loads that are coming down on that. All right, let's continue to the sample section. Let's continue working our way down, all the way down to the basement. The next item that we're going to do is what we call a sill plate. This plate right in here needs to be what we call pressure treated because it's going to be against masonry. So pressure treating basically means it's got a chemical treatment which is put into it through heat and pressure, and it protects it against the chemical reactions that the masonry would have or concrete would have with it. Once again, let's go ahead and find our detail components. We can hover over it and let's see what size it is. Well, again, it's nominal cut lumber and it's 2x6. So let's go to detail components. Two by 6. Notice there's no specific pressure treating. That's all going to be covered with notes. Insert component. Let's go to our drawing. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click right there. Notice it's still on elevation. So I need to redo that. I need to go back to section. And this now should give me the rotate option. And I'm going to place it right here so that it matches the section. All right, so we're starting the section out. It's beginning to look like these elements right in here. Let's jump to the next element right in here. If we hover over it, that's going to tell you the keynote is 04, so it's division 4. It's an 8 by 8 by 16 CMU. So, and 2 core. So let's go ahead, detail components. Go ahead and close the wood, open up the masonry, go to concrete masonry units, 2 core, and this time we're going to go all the way down to 8 by 8 by 16 CMU and insert the component. All right, always make sure that the grout, which is where the cursor is located to the bottom. Now in this case we only have one, so I'm just going to left click. And notice what happens when you drag. You can put multiple components in, okay? But in this case, we've only got one. I want to go ahead and find out where the justification is of this, whether it's to the left, whether it's a little bit more to the left, and see where it is. Okay, if you take a look at the 2 by 6 in here, the block itself is actually a little bit more to the left, and it lines up with this plywood right in here. So just hover over it. You can see it's a 1/2 inch plywood. That means when we move this one, we move it from here to here, and then we're going to move it again to the left 1/2 inch. Now, if we wanted to, we can begin with the vertical plywood so that we can complete this section right in here. Again, it's the same division as we did for this one. So if we hover over that just for clarification, you're going to see it's division 6. Go to detail components. Close masonry, open up wood, go back to sheathing, plywood. This time we're going to use a 1/2 inch. And we can drag there. And for now, we're going to continue dragging a certain distance. We can always modify that later on vertically. All right, so that's looking pretty clean right there. Let's go ahead and continue with our wall here. You're going to notice that this is wider than the 8 by 8. So this one's going to be a 12 by 8. Vertical dimension is 8. Horizontal dimension is 12. And the depth is 16. These are all modular dimensions. Now, the purpose for this option that we did this was to create a ledge for the brick to rest on when we build that short 4-inch, that roughly 4-foot wall of brick right out the front. Notice there's also a gap between the brick and the plywood, etc. That's an air gap. All right, so let's go ahead and let's find this guy right here. If you hover over it, you see it's 12 by 8 by 16. Go to the detail components. We're going to close this out, open up the masonry, concrete masonry units, 2-core, and let's find a 12 by 8 by 16. Insert. We're set to section. And what we can do is, before we do anything else, make sure that the grout or the mortar is down below. And I am just going to go vertical at this point till about there. I'm going to go ahead and move all of these. Make sure that this point right here ends up with the end point of the mortar. And that's created the ledge. And you notice we've come a little bit below our slab. That's actually where we want to be. Because what we're going to do is we're going to draw a 4-inch thick slab in here on 4-inch gravel. And there's a slight haunch in here. It thickens up right where it rests on the footer. So again, these are modular. You don't want to have to break one of these up, although they do come in 4-inch heights also. They come in varying heights for that. All right, so that's a good step right there, what we did. Let's go ahead and let's see what size we ended up doing this footer. Let's go ahead and do a measurement. Distance from here to here is shown at 11 5/8. That should be the equivalent of 2 feet. So you could draw it 2 feet. And the height should be 12 inches. So we're going to draw a rectangle here. I'm going to go ahead and draw a temporary line across here. I can find the center point for it. All right, so let's see what layer we have in this one. This is A concrete, so I'm going to switch to A concrete. I'm going to go ahead and I am going to draw a rectangle. I'm going to make it 24 inches by 12. All right, my units are set to inches, so that'll be the correct size. I'm going to go ahead and using the move command, I'm going to move from midpoint to that line that I created there. I can then delete that line from there. And this is the correct size for our footer. In some cases, you might only have 20 inches wide. This would be determined by the structural engineer, or for residential, sometimes the architect will do it too. All right, so let's go back to here. Hover over this. And we've got what we call a concrete hatch. I'm going to switch layers. Switch to concrete hatch. I'm going to find the hatch that I want. Should be architectural concrete. I'm going to highlight the area right here. Press escape. All right. So what we can do, All right, let me continue here. So let's go back to the other drawing. Hover over this line. A concrete, because we are going to be drawing the slab at this point. Let's make sure we're in the right layer, which is A concrete. I'm going to start my line work here. I'm actually going to start at the block, even though normally you would have the concrete slab be about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch off the slab to allow for expansion and contraction. I'm going to go ahead and draw a line up to there. I'm going to go ahead and hide my level for now. I'm going to offset this 4 inches. And from this corner of the footer, I'm going to draw a line up. Take my ortho off. The tab is going to be at 45 degrees. And I'm going to go ahead and fillet the lines. I'm going to go ahead and draw that vertical line that represents that 1/2 inch gap. And I am going to offset that 1/2 inch in this direction. This would probably be filled with a rubberized strip that would go around there that would be able to compress if the slab tends to expand. Now, when it comes time to hatch something like this, you're going to want to close the end. Go back to the hatch layer. Find the proper hatch. And hatch that also. We'll get to the reinforcing later, including these rebars right here. All right, let's continue with the construction. Now this plate is held onto the block wall with what they call an anchor bolt. So if you hover over this element right here, you're going to notice it's an anchor bolt hook, and the keynote is 0.5, and it's a 5/8 inch hooked anchor bolt. So let's go to detail components. Let's close this one. Division 5 is metals, and you're going to find it under common work, results for metals, under metal fastenings. You're going to find anchor bolts and anchor bolts hook. The fact that it's got this little curve right here means it's a hooked anchor bolt. So let's go ahead and click on that. We're going to find 5/8 inch and insert the component. Now this one has a couple of motions to it that you're going to need to do. Number one is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my ortho back on. And I'm going to move the nut a little bit higher, right in here. And then I'm just going to give it a little bit more of a hook till it's almost vertical. Then I'm going to go ahead and take it and I'm going to move it down to the top of the pressure treated plate. Now they repeat these maybe every 2 feet, every 4 feet. Again, this is a standard piece of lumber, so it probably comes in 12-foot lengths or 8-foot lengths. You need an anchor bolt on each end or where you turn the corners. You also need them in between based on the uplift requirements that you may have for that project. All right, so let's go ahead and let's start doing some additional materials. If you recall, in the basement, we actually go and open up our basement construct. You notice that we have a wall located directly in front of that 12-inch wall. This is that block wall that we've been showing you with the 8-inch masonry unit on the top. So inside of that, we actually have a 4-inch stud wall. So let's go back to the wall section. And we're going to draw that wall in section on the inside face. So you guys probably already know that it's going to be division 6. So if we hover over this member right here, it tells you it's a 2x4. So let's go to detail components. Close metals. Open up wood. Back to wood framing. Nominal cut lumber. There's a 2x4. You can insert the component. And if you want to rotate it, we're going to place it here. Or we're going to carry it all the way up to the bottom of the joist. At least we have it lined up at that point. This gap doesn't matter at that. All right, so just like the joists, these vertical elements between the top plate, the double top plate that we're going to have if it was structural. In this case, it's not, so we're only putting a single one. And the sill plate at the bottom are going to be what we call 2x4 studs, and they are spaced a certain distance apart from each other. Could be 12 inches, 16 inches, 2 feet. And again, we could draw them just to be complete, but we have to make sure that we're going to be drawing them in elevation, again, because they are perpendicular to our view and we are not cutting through them. So let's go ahead and go 2x4, insert component. This time switch over from section to elevation. Draw it in this direction, and I'm going to rotate it. Move it from here to here. And I'm going to grab it by this grip. Pull it down. Once you have a 2x6 or a 2x10 or the block or the plywood at a certain size, you don't necessarily need to keep going to the detail components. You can copy this guy and bring it all the way down to the bottom. Then we can pull this guy and pull it down. So there's the beginnings of that wall. Now we're going to go ahead and apply our finish to the inside. So let's see what we're using in here. This represents the finish right here. So let's go ahead and go to the outside right here. Called gypsum wallboard. The keynote is division 9. Probably going to be under finishes. And it's a 1/2 inch gypsum wallboard. Go to the detail component. Close division 6. Division 9 is finishes. And we're going to go to gypsum plastering. We're not going to go there. You got gypsum board, which is what we want. Open that up. Gypsum wallboard. And we're going to use 1/2 gypsum wallboard. We don't need type X. That's for fire rating. I'm going to use the 1/2 inch gypsum wallboard. Insert component. We want to make sure that we are in section, which we are. And by the way, vertically on the inside of this 2x4 stud wall, we're also going to use 1/2 inch. So if you take a look at the way that this was set up in this drawing, this was done first, and then the ceiling was put later on with the gypsum wallboard abutting into here. So let's go ahead and let's do the same thing. So what we can do, start at this point, start dragging all the way down. And we're going to leave it a little bit off the slab so we can introduce a finish material and bring it in as far as we can. You can always drag it down a little bit after that in case you want. Just make sure to drag everything else with it. All right. Now, what you also want to make sure is that when you do that, that your hatch stays where it is. So let's go ahead and let's repeat the command. I hit the space bar for this, by the way. So instead of having to go back to the detail components, I was able to hit the space bar for that. Now, if I go here, once again, it's going to be above. So I'm going to do an X flip, bring it down below, bring it to here, and stretch it over to the right. Now, I'm going to be trimming all of this anyways. We're not going to be seeing this edge. So it doesn't matter whether they line up perfectly or not. If you do want them to line up perfectly, you can always draw a vertical line here as a guideline to take you to exactly where you want to be. All right. This looks great. One of the things about this stud wall inside of the block is that it can also be used for electrical boxes, etc., but it can also be used for insulation. So that's what this element is right here. This is called batt insulation. Keynote is 721, and it's 3.5-inch R11 fiberglass batt insulation. Now, what I'm going to do a little bit different from this drawing that was located here, I'm going to use a fire stop about halfway up. I'm going to go ahead and copy the 2x4 shown at the bottom, and I'm just going to eyeball it somewhere up in here, okay? Doesn't have to be perfect for that. I'm going to go ahead and go to the detail components. I'm going to go to the division. What division was it that we showed? Was division 7, right? Let's go ahead. Division 7. So we want thermal insulation. There's the batt insulation, and we're going to use the 3.5-inch R11. We could use R13. Let's go ahead and just use the R11 on this one. I'm going to start it right now. By the way, you can change the justification to left, center, right. Right now it's shown in the center. We're going to go ahead and notice, just like the drywall or the block, we can stretch it up. Stretch it up to there. I'm going to hit the space bar again to start again. And I can start it from this point up to here. So now we've got that much of the section already drawn. We're going to worry about the hatching and the soil later on. We're not going to worry about that, or for some of the reinforcing. Let's get the basics of this done. All right, so let's continue on up. So we had already stretched this plywood sheathing on the outside vertically a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the wall on the main level. We know this is a 2x6. We've already put in a 2x6. Let's go ahead and copy this. Pull that up to here. And what we want to do is, we know that this 2x6 wall is going to go up to 8'2". So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset one of my guidelines here. I'll set it 8'2", and I'll set it vertically to where I want the top of that wall to end. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Copy it from here up to there, and I'm going to put what we call a double top plate. Again, because it's holding the weight of all the floor joists that you're going to have in here. So this adds a little bit more strength than the singles. This is normal to the construction industry. The reason we didn't do it here or here is because it's supported along the entire length by the block underneath it. Now let's go ahead and let's go to a 2x6. I think we can do a space bar again. Actually, I can't, because I did some additional commands. So let's go ahead and go to detail components. Wood plastics, wood framing, nominal cut lumber, 2x6, insert component. This time I'm going to draw it vertically, so I want it in elevation. Again, just like the 2x4 wall we did below. drag, and drag it vertically to that point right there. So there's our stud wall. More than likely it's at 12 inches on center since it's a bearing wall for the support of the upper level floor framing is all resting on that. Now, one of the things that we're also going to do is there are some elements from this drawing that you are just going to copy over. And one of those elements is going to be the windows. You are not going to copy the header right in here, but all the components below that you're going to go ahead and copy over. So let's go ahead and based on what windows you have there, that's going to determine where the head and the sill of the window is located. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that this member right in here is at its proper location, that our cabinets can be inside here in the kitchen, and we're going to have enough room to put this window right here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line, temporary line, from the top of the plate at that point. I'm going to go ahead and copy this element, 2x6, and set it up in here. So what I'm doing is I'm framing the opening for the window. Now the sill, fine as a 2x element right in here. The header, however, is holding up a lot of weight. So you want to make sure you have a little bit stronger element. In this case, we have a 2x6 wall, frame wall. That wall is actually 5.5 inches wide. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 2x members in here. So if you want to know what it actually is, you can see that these are 2x6s. I went to extended data. And they're turned vertically, and the space in between is filled with 1/2-inch plywood. Now, 2x6 is 1.5 by 5.5. So if we have 3 of them at 1.5, we have 4.5 inches. We still have another inch we got to make up. Again, because the width is 5.5 inches for a 2x6. We fill that in with 1/2-inch plywood. So we can simply take a 2x6, you can rotate it. Go ahead and move it to the outside. We can copy it to this. Let's go ahead and insert a 1/2-inch plywood. We may even be able to copy it from here because we used 1/2-inch plywood there. Place it. And I'm going to use the stretch command. Have it by here. And I'm going to re-stretch it one more time so I can snap to the proper location, this end to this end. And I can copy this element to here. And then I can repeat copy and copy my plywood in between. This creates a solid header that the vertical direction for the wood is stronger than a horizontal direction. So it allows all that load that is on that window to span to both sides. And the fact that you're using 2x6s or 2x8s means that that is not going to flex. There's not going to be deflection on that beam. If it curves, guess what happens to the window? It may not work, may even crack, depending on what the design is for that load. All right, we're going to take a break now. We're going to come back after the break. Looks like it right here. We were setting up the header. I'm going to go ahead and assume that you probably had a 3-foot by 4-foot or a 4-foot by 4-foot. I'm going to go ahead and offset 4 feet line up in here, which means that my header is going to be about up at this location, which is where they put it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move my header up to that location right there. Now what that means is that there is simply just a little bit of insulation for small studs, which are between the header and the top plates at this location. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put insulation here, and I'm going to put a little bit of insulation there. I'm going to go back to the detail components. I'm going to go to division 7. I'm going to close this one. Thermal and moisture, thermal insulation, bad insulation, and I'm going to repeat the same insulation I did before. I can do it from the center. I'm going to go to the sill, and I'm going to begin it here and go up again. Now, one of the things that I did incorrectly here is I used a 3.5-inch insulation. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete that. And I want an insulation that's going to fill up the space in between. In this case, it'll be a 5.5-inch insulation. Let's go back to detail components. And I'm going to do 5.5. Insert component. And now it's going to be the right size that I wanted, located right here. And finish it up in there. All right, now this is where we can actually go ahead and put the plywood starting on this side, and we're going to go ahead and put the drywall on the inside. Again, the plywood should go up to the bottom of the window that we're going to be setting in, which means it's going to line up with the top of your 2x plate. We're going to do the same thing with this guy, with the 1/2-inch gypsum drywall, but we're going to stretch it up a little bit more to this point right in here. This is shim that allows you to straighten the window out. So let's go ahead and let's stretch this plywood from here, and we're going to stretch it all the way up to where we had that line located right in there. We're going to go ahead and we're going to, after we put the window in, we're going to go ahead and do the drywall. We can copy it from here, or we can just reinsert it in there. So this is one of those instances where we can actually take this entire window and we can copy the whole item. I'm going to take everything in here. I'm going to go ahead and press R and we go ahead and copy it. Copy. This element. I want to copy this element too. I'm going to go ahead and copy it from here. And this point. Now, if you notice, I did not locate it in the right direction, so I'm going to go ahead and move. Use the move command. I'm going to type the letter P for previous. Actually, it's actually going to be moving this guy, so I'm going to go ahead and highlight this guy in here. I'm going to remove. See if I can remove this guy in here. Move. R. I'm going to remove this element. And I'm going to move this guy to this point right here. Now this should allow my 1/2-inch drywall to come in right here. I go ahead and move this element from here to here. Give myself room for the drywall. Go to the detail components. Close thermal insulation. And I'm going to go to division 9 again, which is finishes. Gypsum board, not gypsum plastering. Gypsum wall board. And there's my 1/2-inch gypsum. Make sure that we are set to section. And I am going to start somewhere up here and drag down, again, leaving a space for the finished floor when I do that. Now let's take a look at the difference that we have between here. So what ended up happening, this line, I lined up with the top of this element right in here. So I'm going to pull it back down to that point. And I actually have these elements flush on this point as opposed to flush at this point. I'm going to make some slight adjustments here. Again, using the move command, I'm going to select everything I want to move. I'm going to click R for remove. I'm going to remove my sill plate in here. I'm going to go ahead and move my window back over to this point right in here. And I'm going to go ahead and I am going to stretch this guy to line up here. Close enough. And I'm going to go ahead and move this guy back over. This is not absolutely necessary, but let's get it to match as close as possible. So again, construction is not something that is perfect. There's always going to be some slight variations in it, some tolerances. So whether there's a gap here or a gap here, as long as you've got the shim located in here, that's going to allow you to level off the window, that's going to work fine. All right, so that looks pretty good, what we've got going in there. Now what we can do is we can take these elements right in here. Actually, let's go ahead and copy the upper level. It's an input. Let's go to copy. I'm going to highlight all of this. Let's go ahead and take these with it. Make sure that grabs everything that we've got in there. That's okay. And I'm going to copy them from this point. Let's pick a new point. So I did not have that plywood drawn yet. I'm going to copy from here. Now these I do. I'm going to copy from here. And copy to. Now I can go ahead and take this plywood and copy up to the top, or I can go to the detail component. Division 6 woods, sheathing, plywood, 1/2 inch, insert component. Make sure we're in section. And we can click on this point right here and drag it on up. That point there. I'm going to go to detail components. Close sheathing, division 6. I close that up too. And I'm going to go ahead and under finishes, division 9. I'm going to go to gypsum board, gypsum wall board, 1/2 inch, insert component. And I'm going to go ahead and start it here. I can always shift it down later. And it's going to be pretty much the same situation we had before. All right, so that's acceptable. How we have that shown right in there. And this was just merely a guideline at that point. So I can go ahead and delete that guideline, the same thing that this one was, guideline. And this was a guideline in there. Now our floor system here is very, very similar to the floor system that we have here. So there's no sense in redrawing it. We're just going to relocate a couple of the elements at least for the plywood, at least for the 2x10 joists and the drywall that's down below. Let's go ahead and highlight all of those elements right here. And this one we're also going to have, but we're going to relocate that in. So we can take all of those elements, right click, recent input, copy, and we can go from our level lines to our other level lines that we use as a guideline at that point. There's some what we call blocking right here, and we're going to go ahead and center that. Just going to highlight that element and go from here. And again, just eyeball it right in the center, or if you can spot the center point, that's excellent. I'm going to go, this 2x10 joist continues 2 feet to the outside. Now notice, one of the things that happened here is I started my section way too close to here. So all I need to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab everything that I drew so far. And I'm just going to shift it over, give myself a little bit more room. Eventually, I'm going to want to give it enough room to be able to draw all of this in it. So I just shifted it sufficiently over. I'm going to go ahead and take my joist and stretch it out at distance. Use a stretch command, grab the drywall, and shift that over to there. All right, so the distance, we know that from this face of the stud to this face of the stud is supposed to be 2 feet. That's the overhang between the upper level and the main level. So let's go ahead and draw a guideline vertically. Either move it or offset it. Face 2 feet. And then I'm going to go ahead, pull this back. And again, there's another ribbon joist that goes around there. That's going to line up with the stud. I can copy it. Take it from this point to that point. And I could have pulled this joist back to here. All right, so that seems to work okay. We've got a similar condition with our wall located all the way up. Again, it's also an 8'2". No sense in redrawing all of this. So let's go ahead and copy. I'll take all of these elements right in here. I'm going to remove some of them, or I don't need the blocking, but I do need everything else that I've drawn in here. Okay, I'm going to copy it from top of the ribbon joist here to the top of the ribbon joist here, and then I'm going to go ahead and take my plywood and stretch it out, line up back here. Using the stretch command, grab it back here and pull it over to that point right there. Notice how quickly, once you have enough of these elements drawn, that you can reuse and get this section working a lot faster. So, all right, so let's see what's going on at the top of the roof here. I'm going to go ahead and let's double check, make sure that this line in here is the 2 feet over. I may have to pull all this over. So let's check. You see something that may cause a question. Let's go ahead and measure our distance. From here to here should be 2 feet. That's 1'7". So there's something off. That is our actual 2 feet in there. I'm going to use a stretch command. I'm going to stretch all of this. I'm going to stretch it from this point to there with my 2 foot overhang. Now turn it off. And I'm going to go ahead and lay some plywood out and wrap it all the way around in here. Probably can use 1/2 inch here also. Again, there's no load really coming down on that. So let's go ahead and use our plywood. Detail components. Going to be division, actually, let's close division 6, division 9. It is going to be division 6. Go to sheathing again. plywood, 1/2 inch plywood, insert component, and I guess we could start at this point down here and stretch ourselves up to this point. I probably want this to overlap the joint that's coming horizontal at this point, but I'm going to go ahead and draw the horizontal one first. Repeat detail component should repeat itself. So there is my 1/2 inch plywood. At that point, now I'm going to go ahead and stretch this. R for remove. I'm going to remove this and that, and I'll stretch this guy down to here. All right, so we've constructed all the way through the basement, all the wall, window, floor framings, etc., all the way up to our roof located in here. Now, depending on what you have, the slope of your roof may differ from project to project. So make sure whatever you have drawn in your project, whether it's 4.5 to 12 or 5 to 12, that you're using the same pitch that's used right in there. So also, if you notice, this line right here represents the bottom of the roof rafters, and just inside of the plywood is going to be the top of the roof rafters. Now, we can use 2x6 roof rafters, so we're going to draw the diagonal in here at the proper angle. That's going to show me that it's, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and draw it at 4.5 in 12. What is a typical pitch that you guys have been doing? Anybody? 4.5 and 12? For the roof? You guys already drew your elevations. All right, I'm going to go ahead and draw it 4.5 and 12. I'm going to go ahead and just use line work for this. Although I could use a rafter and then edit it. All right, so I checked what the line is. It's G detail fine. Again, we're not cutting it in section. So I'm going to set that as the current layer. Go down to G detail fine. And I'm going to draw a line from this point. I'm going to go 12 over. Actually, I kind of drew a circle. Line from this point. Turn off my ortho. Stretch it out to there. Okay, so the horizontal, I'm going to go ahead and put my ortho back on. I'm going to draw 12 units this way. That can be 12 feet or 12 inches or whatever. I'm going to go 12 feet. And then I'm going to go, actually I went 12 inches there. And I'm going to go 4.5 inches vertically. And then what I can do is draw the diagonal, and that represents the bottom of the rafter. Go ahead and let me delete these two right in here. And I'm going to offset this guy 5.5 inches, which is the size of the rafter that we're using. So using the offset command, I'm going to make sure it's set to 5.5, which is the actual dimension of a 2x6. I'm going to extend that down to there. Also, our overhang is listed as 2 feet with a plumb cut. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a vertical guideline right here. I'm going to offset 2 feet this direction. And I'm going to extend these lines to it. Let's bring this down to make sure that we've got it. So I'm going to use extend. I'm going to go ahead and select a boundary edge that I want to go to. And I'm going to extend this one and this one. I'm going to go ahead and fill it. And fill it. I can remove this right now. So here's my pitch located right there. I'm going to go ahead and draw another guideline somewhere back out in here. And go ahead and I'm going to use the same command, extend. This time there's nothing in between that I have to worry about, so I'm just going to extend that to that point. I can delete this out of there right now. Now, notice we can't have this rafter cutting right through here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and delete the rafter portion from here to here. So there's a triangular piece cut out right here. That's called the bird's mouth cut. You guys already knew that from the Marion when we drew that. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line from here to here and to here. And I am going to go ahead and trim. And I can take all of this out here. If I was to lift this off, you would see a little bird's mouth cut in there. In fact, if I isolate the layer, you can see it right in there. So I actually have to cut this back a little bit right now still. So let's go ahead and undo. And let's take this guy. I'm just going to drag it back from here to that point. All right. This represented the height of our wall, which is 8'2". It matched the one that we had down here at 8'2". And we also have what we call ceiling joists in here. Now our ceiling joists can be 2x6s or 2x8, depending on the spans that we use. We're going to go ahead and we're going to draw them at 2x6. We're going to use a 5.5 inch insulation here. So if you notice, there's some hidden lines here and here. And what those represent is the ceiling joist hiding behind the rafter that we're doing at an angle. So let's see what they use for that, whether we just changed, still G detail fine, but they did an override on the line type. So let's go ahead and do a line right in here. I'm just going to draw a line from here to roughly here. I'm going to offset it 5.5, which is the actual dimension. And I'm going to bring this guy back to that intersection. I can remove my guideline at this point. I'm going to draw a shorter line here. And I'm going to draw a vertical line here, which I'm going to trim off also. Notice if we did not trim the top of that ceiling rafter, the corner here in a triangular piece, that means it would stick up through the roof. We don't want that to happen. I can either trim this piece off or bring it back to the intersection point. I'm going to go ahead and highlight both of these shorter segments, and I'm going to change the line type from bilayer to hidden to. Again, that represents the ceiling joist hiding behind the roof rafters. All right, let's continue a little bit more information. All right, so let's continue with, let's add a couple more items in here. Let's add our plywood sheathing on the roof. And if we take a look at here, it really doesn't give us that much information. But believe it or not, if you were to highlight it and go to extended data, it's going to tell you what it is. Keynotes there, plywood, inch, tells you it's 5/8 inch plywood. So it does almost exactly the same thing as if you hover over it. So we know what we need there. Now let's take a look at how this condition works right here. If you notice, the fascia board and what we call the drip, in this case we're using a 1x3, is actually dropped a little bit down from the edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and drop ours down. We're going to find out where that angle continues down. And that's pretty easy to do, because what we can do is we can draw them in and extend this line down and locate it accordingly. So if I was to draw a line in here, and I went to extend, I could extend this line, which I'm going to eliminate later. And I'm going to start by taking a look at what we have in here. This is probably a 2x8. If I go to extended data, it's a 2x8. And this one is going to be a 1x3. So I'm going to bring both of those down, and I'm going to place them on the end of where it's supposed to be and move them up to that point right there. So let's go ahead and let's do that. Detail components. Detail components come in their own layers, by the way. So I'm going to go ahead and close. I should have left it open. There's wood framing, nominal cut lumber. Let's do the 2x8 first. Insert the component. I'm going to go ahead and rotate. I'm going to place it somewhere in here. I'm going to do the same thing, go back to detail components. This time I'm going to do the 1x3. Rotate it. And place it in here. Again, sometimes you'll even bring that guy a little bit lower. You have a condition, not necessarily like this, but that'll work fine because you really can't gain too much anyways. All right, so let's go ahead and let's do what we need to do here. Go ahead and move this guy from here. It's gonna hit a spot right in here. So once again, I'm gonna go ahead and draw a guideline right here. I'm gonna move this guy from here. I can delete this. Go ahead and move these two. And now what I can do is do my plywood sheathing in here. Let's verify what size plywood sheathing it is. If I highlight it there under extended data, 5/8 inch plywood. Detail components. Now we used 3/4 inch on the floors, 1/2 inch on the vertical faces of the walls, and now we're using 5/8 inch for this. So we go to sheathing. Go to plywood. I'm going to use 5/8 inch plywood. This point right here. And let's just go ahead and carry it to that point right there. That looks pretty good. All right. At this point, let's go ahead and draw our tiles at the top. And what they're going to do is, if you notice these lines right in here, these represent what we call flashing. Goes around the entire perimeter of the roof. And what it does, it provides a waterproofing condition here with the metal that doesn't allow any water to seep in through here. Located like this with a slight angle at the end, so it causes a drip edge that will not run down your fascia board in here. Now, fascia boards can be composites of many different materials or pieces of wood put together, depending on how fancy or simple you want to be. So let's go ahead, and what we can do is, in this case, let's go ahead and copy this from this drawing, and we're going to bring it straight into our drawing. So we're going to do recent input, go to copy, and we're going to use any one of these points will do. And we're going to place it in there. Now notice, I have a little bit of a problem. The angle is different. So now what I need to do is I need to straighten out the drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this and this. I'm going to go ahead and recent input. I'm going to find rotate if I have one. I'm going to use the base point right here. I'm going to use reference. So the reference angle is this one. Now I need to go to the new angle, right? Well, that didn't help any. In this situation, you may end up wanting to find a common point for both of these. And let's draw it anyways. So just using the line command, I'm going to find out what this is. G detail thin. Could be a little bit heavier if you wanted to. It already is in G detail fine. I'm going to go to G detail thin. I'm going to go ahead and draw a line from here to here. And I'm going to go ahead and draw, taking ortho off. I'm going to go ahead and draw a line to about here. I'm going to use the fillet command and fillet that and make some slight adjustments. Now with that located at the right angle, I'm going to go ahead and lift it up just a little bit using my ortho on. And I'm going to raise it a little bit so that it shows it off of that. Now if we show this drawing right in here, you can see that this extends out a certain distance going vertical in this direction. And then it's overlapped by another series of lines in here. That's going to be your building paper and felt. So that notice it goes over it. So as water runs down this way, it will not travel back in. And then of course it's sealed at this point. So let's go ahead and extend this guy, the ortho off. Let's go ahead and copy this guy. We use the proper angles. Repeat copy. I'm going to copy it from here. So I keep the same angle. And I'm going to copy it to somewhere up in here. And I'm going to copy it there. And I'm going to go ahead and draw a line from here to here. And I'm going to use the fillet command and have that drawn there. Go ahead and draw a guideline here, having my ortho on. And I'm going to use the extend and extending. It should extend. Boundary edge. And extended that line over to the end. All right, the only thing that's left to do is going to be the tile work up here at the top. This is actually one of the tiles that they include with the detail components. Now, this is another 1x3 in here because each tile rests on top of a previous tile with the exception of the last one at the edge. So you need something to sometimes you'll actually see roofs where that last tile is sloped down a little bit more than the other ones. But this is an element that can be used, should be perforated or should be spaced so that water can run past that or through it, etc. So let's go ahead and let's see how we can do our roof up in here. Let's go to our detail components. And let's see what division we can go to here. Should be probably under thermal and moisture protection. Fire stopping. Division 7, sheet waterproofing. Shingles and shakes. Let's try shingles. And they have all different sizes in here. Let's go with the biggest one, which is a 24 heavy wood shake. insert component. And hopefully what we can do at this component is we're going to go ahead and move it up a little bit later on. Well, let's place it right here. And let's carry it all the way up to here. Now what we're going to do is lift it up, including the shakes below it. So let's lift this up. So I guess you gotta highlight every single one of them, right? I'm gonna do undo, undo, and make sure that I highlight all of them. Okay, let's check and make sure we got all of them. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move. I'm going to move it a specific distance. So I'm going to move it up 2 inches, and I'll bring it down lower. I'm going to go ahead and copy this element from here to approximately here. If we can go back a little bit. You put it right on the edge. I guess it really doesn't matter. I can move that next. Now I'm going to go use the rotate command here. I'm going to use reference. Reference is this one, then new one is this one. Bring this guy down. Now I'm going to go ahead and move. And I just messed up there. Right click and visually bring it down. The rest of them. Right. Last couple of things we're going to do is we are going to do the brick and do this sheathing underneath. So let's see what this is. That's just line work, but this is not. This is actually, let's see what it is. Extended data, that's metal lath. And then we're going to go ahead and detail this later on. So let's go ahead, and we know this is the bottom of the rafter. Check out what our distance is here. Let's do a measurement or a distance from here to here. That's a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and offset this 1/2 inch. .5. Go ahead and extend that right into here. And I'm going to show where that vent might be in here by just drawing, number one, go ahead and changing to this layer. And lay out a line somewhere here, perpendicular. Let's go ahead and offset 4 inches. May not need to be that much. And we're going to go ahead and do the lath located right in here. So let's go ahead and highlight the lath. Let's see what it is. Division 9, 2236. Detail components. Division 9. Third Division 9. Supports for plaster. There's your lath. Metal lath. And let's go ahead and let's just use metal lath. Insert component. Now it's asking you to select a curve for the lath. So the big question is it going to go above or below this? Well, it's going to ask you which side. So I placed it on that side. Now all we need to do now is trim out the metal pieces. Let's see if it'll allow us to trim. Yes, it does. And we can delete the rest of it in between. This is going to be a vent that's going to allow you to come through there with air to be able to cool the attic space in here. All right, I think this is a good spot to stop today, and we'll continue again tomorrow during third period. So let me go ahead and
Stop recording.
stop my recording.